Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So I am seeing green, and I am seeing green on my video screen. So I am going to assume that this is doing what it's supposed to be doing. This topic is slightly odd, but it's a point that I'm trying to make. I haven't even told you the topic yet. Land without sound. Now, it does have sound. It's just certain sounds that have been outlawed in that particular land. I try to make points sometimes like this because sometimes it's easier to get across something when it's outside the context that a person normally exists in. Assume for the moment, just assume, place no, what's what I'm looking for? Place no restraints on that, in that sense. Just allow yourself to kind of pretend as if a particular thing exists. As you're walking through the forest, you step through a wormhole and you end up in another reality space. Now, whether you've just hit your head or whatever else, you just know that you're somewhere else. And as you're somewhere else, you're interacting with people. And you realize pretty quickly, as you're just kind of observing, that certain music has been outlawed. There's no sound. Rock music has been outlawed. You find this to be fucking amazing. What do you mean? Why is music outlawed? That sounds insane. Well, somebody explains to you, well, look, music is subversive. You have a situation where you have rock bands and musicians who are going against the state and the society, and that was problematic. It was undermining the entirety of the structure itself. So state outlawed it. The public itself thought that it was better that certain people didn't have the ability to speak and sing and shake and rattle in the ways that those people tend to do so in music and in bands. That being said, you can have all the drugs you want. Drugs are fair game. You can smoke all the brownies, or you can eat all the brownies you want. You can smoke all the pot you want. Heroin, crack, all that stuff, legal. The distinction in their laws, and at least the way they make it, is what you put into yourself is up to you. That's your choice. If I want to eat a pot brownie, that's you to eat a pot brownie. If I want to smoke heroin, that's up to you. Your choice. Now, state does make laws to try to curb the negative side effects of those products, like it would make laws to curb the side effects of any other product that a person was consuming. But for the most part, hands off. You find this to be amazing. Now, in your society that you came from, it was the opposite. You can have all the rock bands you want, but no drugs for the most part. Government said hands off. In the society, you're also going to notice a few things. The power structure itself, meaning media, the political establishment, for the most part, will cater to that particular law. You would have institutions set up that would go after people who are rock bands. Rock bands would be these subversive elements in society that would be this kind of anti-establishment fervor of sorts. But these guys will be illegal. They will be criminals in the society. At the same token, institutions will also grow up that would be giving cash to this thing of maintaining the drug industry. So instead of the DEA, you'll probably have something like the state sound regulating body or whatever. And these guys will put out one study after another saying, yes, sound undermines government. It undermines authority. It is great that we're bashing people who are trying to form rock bands. That's just doing God's work. I'm trying to make a point with this. Your arrangement, how we're arranged as a society, to some degree is slightly arbitrary. It's not fully arbitrary. There were certain reasons for certain things, but at a certain point, your society has exceeded a certain level. You're still holding on to certain traits and attributes that took place hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Many of those things are, for the most part, out of touch. At no point does society reevaluate itself and say, what do we want to keep and what do we want to get rid of? For the most part, those things just have been passed from one generation to the next, with minor increments in behavior. The programs. I remember somebody, I think it was a preacher, actually, when my mom used to drag me to church. But he was making this argument that his family, his mom, used to cut half of the turkey off when he would cook the turkey. And they did this like from one generation to the next. They continuously did this. And when you ask them, why are you doing this? Why are you cutting off half of the turkey when you're cooking your Thanksgiving turkey? And the answer boiled down to, it makes the turkey better. This is how we've always done it. It makes the turkey better in some way. But in what way? I don't know. It just makes the turkey better. They found the grandmother and they asked the grandmother, why are they doing this? And the grandmother kind of made the point, well, we didn't have, the size of our oven was half of the size. We couldn't necessarily fit an entire turkey into the oven, so we used to cut it in half in order to put the turkey in. That's all we could do. The mother and the daughter and the aunts had taken on a trait based on a constraint that no longer existed. I'm saying that's us. Our society in general takes on constraints that we no longer exist. Marriage, again, is one of those things. It's just society has just taken it on. You shouldn't. If you wanted to marry 10 people, if you wanted to marry 3, it should not matter. State should have nothing to do with it. People can figure out whatever arrangement they want to figure out. Nobody's business. But I would make the cases one to the next. Drugs should be legal. You shouldn't be locking people in cages for something that they are putting into their bodies. The sound thing. If you remember, there was a time where there was this political fight going on between the government and rap. Rap music was coming out with stuff like fuck the police and everything else. It was being extraordinarily political. And the things that they were saying, they were radical to some degree. And there were politicians that didn't like it. They were pushing back on what these guys were saying. There's a free speech argument to be made with this idea of music. I'm just making a point that your society could have taken a different texture where certain forms of music would have been outlawed. This arrangement, man. If a law is arbitrary, it should be challenged. The idea that you're going to put somebody in prison for something that's... Yeah, if it's arbitrary, laws need to be able to justify themselves. That's all I'm saying. And our society, our arrangement of society is being somewhat arbitrary. There are things in this arrangement is completely arbitrary. Then you end up with a situation where, despite it being arbitrary, there becomes a certain interest that's associated with keeping it that particular way. So, pot being illegal, for example, you would have the DEA tell you that with a straight face, that marijuana and crack and heroin, for the most part, are the same thing. It's fucking amazing. They would say it with a straight face. But they're paid to say it with a straight face. This is kind of my point. No organization seeks to undermine itself. All organizations, all arrangements seek to persist themselves. Just because you exist, it doesn't necessarily give you legitimacy. Meaning, just because you exist doesn't necessarily mean you have a good reason to exist. You can't necessarily ask the organization itself whether or not that particular organization should exist. The organization is always going to say yes. The DEA, if you're going to ask them anything about pot or anything about any other drug, the DEA has a vested interest in saying that drug is horrible. I need to keep my job. It's nothing to do with legitimacy. Look at your society from the standpoint of not necessarily being in your society, but being external from your society. If you went somewhere and they said music was outlawed, you said these people are fucking nuts. At the same token, somebody can look at your society and say you're locking people into cages for smoking a plant. if I'm not mistaken, in Iran, it was illegal for men to wear jewelry. And again, you can look at that and say, that's fucking nuts. You can go to each country and find laws that are, for the most part, arbitrary. Taken from one context to the next, they seem absolutely absurd. Think of your entire society that way, though. You have a market-driven society. It didn't have to be that way. It did not have to be that way at all. You can have any arrangement you want. In the same way that you have certain laws that may be arbitrary from one culture to the next. How you arrange as a society is the same way. There's a certain level of arbitrary standpoint to it. It starts off with a certain level of being arbitrary, but at a certain point there's certain interests that get us involved in making it one way or the next. I'm just making this point. Don't get stuck from the context that you're in. That's all. It's how we arrange. It's just how we arrange. This is a human conception. This conception can be changed. We're not stuck in this particular way. Yes, we're stuck in it right now, I'm saying, but it doesn't necessarily have to be this way. It's funny, and I'm gonna end it on this. I had a conversation with my wife earlier today, and she was telling me about an anime that she likes. And she said in the anime, she said men are greedy, or men are self-destructive because they're greedy or something like that. And I was making this point to her that men aren't anything. Like, we're not greedy or not greedy. For the most part, you're ensconced in this kind of game space that has certain drivers in regards to what's successful and what's not successful. Behavior that's successful in that particular model just so happens to be destructive in the actual real world physical matter reality that we actually inhabit. So it's not this thing that human beings in and of themselves are these greedy, horrible creatures. It's just human beings can be these greedy, horrible creatures if you give them a reason to be greedy, horrible creatures. We're not destructive just because we're destructive. You're in a game space. They're drivers for your behavior. They bind that behavior to this thing of scarcity, meaning you can go hungry, broke, and everything else. So, Pet Hacker, you can go into Amish countries and find the same sort of rules. Yeah, but I guess, look, this is my basic point. There are two basic points. A, society is arbitrary. It doesn't necessarily have to be this way. What you as a human being believe that you're worth is the society that you're ultimately going to get. Meaning, if you believe that your society should be arranged in a way where poverty doesn't exist, then your society will be arranged in a way that poverty doesn't exist. People act like we're stuck in a particular arrangement. It's like, well, poverty will always exist. No, poverty will always exist in the sense that you think it because you believe that poverty will always exist. Capitalism is not eternal. Understand what I mean by this. People think that the way their society is organized is just this kind of natural law. It's not a natural law. It's something that people came up in a conception and, you know, they implemented. One law, one policy after the next. That's not eternal. That's not God-given. That's not, you know, given by Jesus and all this other stuff. No. This is public conception. It's what people accept. Now, mind you, they accept it on somewhat of an unconscious level, but they are accepting it. Like, if you had 20 million people flooding Washington, D.C., I would imagine that things would change. Well, you're not going to get 20 million people, even though 20 million people would be in their right mind to do such a thing. They don't understand that the choice exists. They don't understand that the choice exists. They don't see a world that doesn't necessarily have themselves arranged in this particular way. They can't conceive it. In their head, this is the way things are. This is the way things are always going to be. So this is what you fall in line to. Yeah. Oh, the second point. Jail is a disgusting thing. Like, understand what I mean? We take this stuff to be so trivial. Putting a person in prison is an immensely disgusting thing. You're taking a human being with thoughts and families and relatives and connections and All of these things. And you're ripping them out of that societal framework. You're tarring the guy as being some kind of criminal or something else. And you're putting him into a cage. If you're going to do that, if you're going to take such a step that's as drastic as ripping liberty from a person, you should have a good reason to do so. This idea of giving state the power to do something like this is atrocious. At the very least, the state needs to be able to justify the reasons why it's going to be able to do this to a citizen of this particular country. That's all. It's, you know, Republicans are these, you know, supposed to be these liberty-toting maniacs, but they're perfectly okay with ripping liberty from a person and putting them in prison. I'm saying that's an issue. That's an issue. You shouldn't be able to put people in prison to the degree that you put people in prison, particularly not for stupid shit like smoking a plant or smoking any drug. Drugs should be legal, period. Your issue with people doing drugs is not the drugs themselves. The issue is the society that those people are in that are causing them to do it. It's almost like saying, that's almost like making a law against being poor, if that makes sense. Making this case of saying, well, I'm going to stop people from doing drugs by just mandating that people don't do drugs. Well, that's great. Do these people have a reason why they're doing those drugs? What is the pretext? What is the reason? Is it just that sometimes people are people and they want to get a little buzz? Yes. Is it sometimes they have a hard, fucking miserable life and they're looking for an escape? That answer is also yes. So going to the degree of making a law mandating something is insane. Those people are still going to do whatever those people are going to do. You're finding this kind of pretext to lock people in prison for a behavior that's perfectly natural based on the conditions that your society is driving. I don't like people. Look, I don't like the putting people in prison thing. It feels like you're throwing people away. I don't like this idea that state is ripping away or putting people in cages and then using our tax dollars to do it. It's fucking insane. There are better ways to handle the situation. Hey guys. Jail is a removal of self-determination. It is the taking of a creator-endowed freedoms based on the laws of man. Corruptible man. I like that. I like that. Try it, Pazo. But Jamal, we're civilized. That's how we roll. We're not civilized. Rubel, Roy. Okay, I can't pronounce your name. I'm not even going to try. I'm sorry. No. It's like kids telling themselves that they're adults. Like, I don't think rational people behave this way. That's all. I don't think rational people behave this way. Your society, understand what I mean here. Your society has developed a certain degree of technology. However it developed it, well, it was military, industrial, whatever. It has developed a certain level of technology. Your biggest problem as humanity has been that ultimately you were born in the situation of lack. There's certain things that you need. You need food, clothing, shelter. You need this kind of self-determination source, or affirmation, I should say. Meaning, there are things that are external to you that you need. You don't just necessarily exist as a thing unto yourself. So the question becomes, who's going to do the labor? Who does the work? Well, you've arrived at a point in history, or a point in our time, where that question is answered. Technology. Your technology gets better and more refined, where your technology for the most part handles the labor. What does your society needs? And does your society have the capacity to provide for those needs? The answer is yes. The answer is yes. We don't do that. We don't do that. We still have war, we still have poverty, we still have all these fighting for resources and everything else. A sane, irrational people would say, common heritage, and let's figure out how to make it work. Each person jockeys for position, and neither wants to give up their position. So if the United States thinks it's number one, it says, okay, we're going to be number one. And no, we're not going to have common heritage, because if we have common heritage, we're giving up our number one status. This is more to do with competition, and more to do with this kind of status thing. Or you can say domination of sorts, as opposed to not necessarily having the capacity to feed and clothe and have a certain level of standard of living, public health all across the world. We're beyond the point where there's scarcity. That's what I'm getting at. Scarcity at this point is a choice. War at this point is a choice. Fighting for resources at this point is just a choice. At one point, you can make an argument that, you know, this particular country didn't have a resource, another country needed it, and these countries were fighting for resources, etc. But come on, we're not there now. We're not there now. You can have manufacturing plants. So it was like a plant doing t-shirts. They were doing like 1 million t-shirts an hour or something. Some ridiculous, insane amount of production. Poverty is a vicious, disgusting thing. Like, you're putting a person in a situation of lack. That person doesn't necessarily have the things that that person needs to make their way in the world. And beyond that, that person full well understands that from the standpoint of their society, looking at themselves, society looks at them a particular way. That's all I'm saying is that's an irrational society. That society is creating certain problems and certain eddies that society is going to have to deal with, whether it's crime, whether it's poverty, whether it's, let me just say, aberrant behavior. I categorize it all as aberrant behavior. Doesn't have to be that way. That's all. Fix the economic problem and you will fix most of the drug problem. Kevin, yes, that's my point. Kevin put it far better than I did. Yes. The rest can be fixed with rehab, safer alternatives, and support groups. And Kevin, yes, I agree. Kevin, it isn't rocket science. That's true, man. I don't know. I don't understand this country. I gotta be honest. Like, I don't get the, you would think that if somebody says, look, these people are doing drugs, and some of these people are doing drugs because they want to do drugs, and as a human being, they should be able to choose whatever the hell they want to choose. But the faction that you're trying to reach is the faction that are doing drugs because something else is going on that's driving that behavior. That's kind of what I'm getting at. Put aside the people who just want to get stoned and get high and everything else. God bless them. They can have a good damn time. I'm talking about the people who are doing hard, viciously hard drugs because of what's going on either around them or what's adversely affecting them. Now, before you say, well, this is an independent choice, understand that's not necessarily true. Your free will is somewhat constrained by the things that are going on around you. It's not like you're this kind of independent entity that's not necessarily being affected by anything around you. You are being programmed to being influenced by what's going on. If as a human being you're looking for some level of escape because of what's going on around you, it's not necessarily crazy. Understand, everyone looks for escape. Whether it's I'm going away for the weekend, whether it's I'm going to play this video game, whether it's whatever that is, everybody looks for some level of escape. That level of escape allows the shittiness of the regular existence to persist itself. You have some people who look for escapes in different ways. In this particular case, these people are looking for escapes in harder drugs. Deal with the issue, though. Doing some kind of proclamation, it just sounds insane to me. It's politicians, just as political wisdom, tends to want to look tough. For them, looking tough is equated to being a good politician. They don't want to seem weak. They don't want to seem like a patsy. They don't want none of those things. America likes a politician that looks tough and strong and all this other stuff. So for them, being tough on drugs is, I'm going to put people in prison for a very long time and I'm going to give them a miserable fucking life. Has nothing to do with good sense. Nothing at all. It has everything to do with I want to look tough on drugs. The other politician, let's say the Democrat. Now, what position is he going to take if the other guy is taking a hardline stance against drugs? Is he going to take the right position, or is he going to take a position based on what he considers to be the political wisdom? It's where do you want to fight? If you're playing chess, somebody makes a move on the far end of the board. If I believe that move at the far end of the board is a good move, if I believe that, hey, that's something I need to pay attention to, then I may do something about it. If I think that person is a lunatic and I don't want anything to do with it, then I ignore it. because I consider that person to have just wasted a move. If we're having this conversation about prisons, and a Republican is going to come out saying, lock them up, put them in prison, all this other stuff, it behooves the Democrat to take the same position. You're not going to out-Republican a Republican by being batshit crazy in regards to these kind of criminal drug reform. You should take the honest position. We lock up far too many people. We have 5% of the world population with 25% of the world's population in our prisons. We shouldn't keep locking these people up. Hell, even bring up the fact that the drug war was started by Nixon in a bid to lock up blacks and hippies. Bring it all up. Make your case. Make your argument. Stop being batshit crazy. You're not going to win that argument being batshit crazy. I guess the point I'm making to you is that's a move on the far end of the board. It's true that politicians like to do this thing of looking tough, but that's only because you agree that that's what they want. The public wants. I'd argue that the public actually wants solutions. You just need to make the case. So. Hey, I was given a brownie once and I didn't realize till after it all it was special. Yeah, man, brownies are tough. I got a brownie from someone, a friend of mine, and put it this way, I've never been more stoned in my life than with brownies. And probably the two most embarrassing situations that I've ever experienced in my life were because of brownies. Yeah, it was pretty bad. So the good time, or the good one that went well, this was years ago. I was geeking for hours. Like, it was to the point, I was there with my wife. And I think it was like 3 in the morning. I think I ate the brownie at like 7 o'clock. We were at a cookout. I think it was on my birthday. And it's like 3 in the morning, and I am seeing the weirdest shit in my head. Like anything that I think of, I am seeing in my head, and almost like stereo. It was amazing. And I'm geeking, like laughing my ass off. And my wife was like, "Will you shut up? Will you just shut up or get out of the bed?" The other one, I was in New Orleans. New Orleans. Yeah, I was in New Orleans visiting a friend, and it was a cookie. It was a baked cookie. That was baked good. And this was before I met my wife, I think. Yeah, this was before I met my wife. That day was amazing. That day ended horribly. Like, oh God, it was so embarrassing. I was on Bourbon Street, walking down Bourbon Street, listening to jazz and everything else. The world was great. My friends didn't want to go with me. Her and her girlfriend hated Bourbon Street, so they went on and did their thing. And they had a rendezvous to meet, and they didn't want me to take me on with the rendezvous because the person was paranoid. So it was one of these weird scenarios. It was just weird. And so I'm going down Bourbon Street, and it's like I'm walking down, a guy comes out and says, "Do you like tits?" And I'm like, yeah, yes, sure. He's like, "Come on in. It's a strip club." And I'm talking to the strippers. I'm just sitting there talking to the strippers while I'm drinking something. I don't remember what it was. I think it was tequila. And my friends hit me up saying it's ready to go back. Now, I didn't get a dance. I didn't want to dance with anything else. And I don't tend to do strip clubs because ultimately I just end up sitting there talking to the strippers. But side note, in this particular case, I go out to my friend. We're in the car, and she's like, "All right, here's a cookie." My friend says strong, but here's a cookie. So I'm like, fine. I have an immense tolerance based on all the times I've been in hospital, so fuck it. Let's have it. I'm optimistic. And so I'm good. The world is good. We get to the house, maybe like 20 minutes. They're having a cookout. Here's an awesome thing. So my friends they were lesbians, and when we went to a cookout, everyone at the cookout was a female, and all of them were lesbians. Now, this didn't necessarily matter in regards to interactions. It was more so just me, like this kind of thing of watching this, like, wow, this is amazing. I've never necessarily been in like, allowed in this culture or peak in this culture in this way before. But again, like I said, none of that mattered to me. We get to the house, and the room starts to spin. And I still think to myself, okay, keep your shit together. It's okay. Now, at some point, they're smoking and they're passing it around. And so, all right, we're passing it. Hey, let's do it. We're good. I'm still good. The world is good. About 10 minutes later, the room is spinning. And it's spinning in a way that's making me nauseous. Like where it's like your inner ear, where it's like, oh man, if it just settles down, I'll be okay. Keep your shit together. It's okay. Keep your shit together. It's okay. And at a certain point, I went to the bathroom, and I think I stayed in the bathroom for the next 2 hours. I could not. I was so nauseous. It was like it was making me so nauseous. And my friend started to make me paranoid, because even though I was nauseous, I was still clear-headed as can be. I was just nauseous. But she's making me paranoid. It's still pot. And she's like, are you okay? I said, yeah, I'm okay. I'm just nauseous. And she sends me another text. She's sending me this by text. And she's like, are you sure you're okay? I'm texting back, yes, I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm just a little nauseous. Do you need an ambulance? I don't think so, no. I'm okay. I don't want an ambulance. Are you sure we can get you an ambulance? It's like, oh, dude, stop saying ambulance. You're freaking me out. Yeah, that was embarrassing. That was immensely embarrassing. God, no. An ex-girlfriend and I used to go to strip clubs on occasion once the stripper started making out with her. But when she realized she wasn't going to get any money, she stopped. Right, that's a weird scenario, man. I never liked strip clubs because it made me awkward. And what I mean by awkward, I just mean I could not get past the fact that it was a human being at the other end. Like, it's one thing if the stripper was a robot, fair enough. There's nothing there. Ooh, I can have fun. But that's a human being there, and then it becomes, is this human being? She's not doing this because she likes me. She's not doing this because she wants me. She's doing this purely for cash, and something felt a little awkward about that. That's all. So I never could get past that part of strip clubs. A friend of mine had no issue with that. He was perfectly okay. We went to, this was like 5, 6, 7 years ago. It was so long ago. And there was a woman named Sparkle, and she was absolutely gorgeous. And there were other ones where I was like, okay, I don't want them to ask me if I want a lap dance, because it would be awkward for me to have to say no to that. But Sparkle asked, and Jalil, he was out doing his own thing, so I said yes. And she said, Jesus Christ, this has gone so far into the rears. This is bad. She said, what was it? She says, 24 lap dance, 40, and I'll let you grab my ass. And I said, that's okay. We don't have to do that. No, that's okay. She did her thing for a song, and I think when I went out, I was slightly disheveled because the woman who was out there, she was like, everything went okay? I said, yes, everything went okay. And I thought to myself, I never want this to happen again. Now, it's not because it was bad, and nothing like that. It was somewhat the opposite. It was this thing of, in my head, under normal circumstances, I am having some relations with the person who's rubbing on me in this way. I don't know this person. Like, I have no relations to this person at all. It's like, this person is not my friend. This person is not my buddy. This person is some random person who I just paid. I feel a little off. That's the way it was. And maybe I'm overthinking it. And yes, I probably am overthinking it, because ultimately it's culture and all this stuff. It's just programming. But it just felt a little weird. And I don't even think it's a cultural thing. I think it's a guy thing. Or at least a me thing. In my head, it's like, it's game time. But it's not game time, because nothing else is going to take place. It's like something else. And I don't know what that something else is. And I don't necessarily like that something else. But yeah. Yeah, this has gone way, way into the weirdnesses, into the weird stuff. Yeah, Gardenome, you're right. Avoid combining weed and alcohol. It's just the way that happened. Winkle the Bernie Bro. I love that name, Winkle the Bernie Bro. That's interesting. I never had stomach problems, acid reflux, ulcers, or anything like that, but I'll look into it. Okay. Catherine Horse, you're a good person. I am just a person like everybody else. Strip clubs builds character. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. I love that. J. Scott, strip clubs build character. I used to have a friend of mine when we were playing chess. We were talking shit to one another. And as you're like saying these bad cutting things, and he's like, yes, suffering builds character. Yeah, pretty much. Let's see. Kevin, no strip club makes whores. Oh, that's brutal. So let's talk about that for the moment. I will make the case that culture and all this other stuff, for the most part, is programming. It's not real. Like, much of the stuff that we take on as attributes, our behaviors, is stuff that took place from the past. At no point did we say, hey, let's reevaluate how we interact based upon what's going on right now. That never took place. That never took place. So, this idea of whores, or whatever, or sex, or even sex for that matter, you would think that that would be more casual. You would think that would be a lot more casual, that people would show love more freely and everything else, since that would be this kind of giving and affection and everything else. I don't understand why pleasure and affection for some reason has taken a negative. You would think that that would be the positive aspect of a society, and that would be something that would be given more freely. But again, I consider this stuff to be somewhat arbitrary in the way we've arranged ourselves. I mean, that may be some kind of religious thing, that could be all sorts of stuff. Just this kind of one incremental change over the next leading to our current society. But the society fundamentally still being stuck in 200, 300, 400, 500, how many ever years back in the past. Yeah. Yeah. Conditioning from religious except populace of the past. Yes. Hollingsworth Thomas, Miss Thomas. Sometimes I hang out in the shadows, no. Force them to recycle. Force them to recycle. Alright, so just for people who don't know what that one is, I've joked my wife, not joked, I've chided her a little bit, that recycling is ridiculous. Now, not at a whole level, not at this massive level, that's not it. You have massive problems associated with your environment, like massive fucking problems. Biodiversity loss, carbon in the atmosphere. The biodiversity loss alone, what, 40% of the extinctions have taken place over the last 50 years. That is a mind-blowing thing. We're murdering species on this planet at a massive rate. Carbon, the amount of carbon we're pumping into the atmosphere. Even if the people want to completely ignore this idea of climate science, and I have a report that's coming up that deals with this thing of talking about climate science and how, yes, the data is consistent among 1,500 records or 1,500 experiments. You have two main growers, gas industry and animal agriculture. Now, it's nice that you recycle. I would imagine that people recycle because it makes them feel good to recycle. It's, ugh, I put my can in this bin. I feel fucking awesome. I'm doing awesome things for the environment. I'm a good goddamn person. And that's great. You did put your can in the recycling bin. That's awesome. You understand that you have massive environmental degradation based upon the behaviors that we've taken on this planet. It is nice that you put your can in the recycling bin. That is not going to solve the issue. I'm sorry, it's not. It makes you feel better. It doesn't solve the issue. I'm sorry being a bad guy. Gardenome jokes me for this. But it's not that it doesn't matter. If you had a society that was arranged in a way where recycling was just kind of built into the fabric of the society, fair enough. That society will still have to deal with gas. the reason for the capitalistic impulse that would allow that guy this industry to make massive amounts of profit at the expense of the society itself. And the way you do your animal agriculture. Like, that's a big fucking deal. I put my can in this bin, and yes, you're still going to have this massive environmental damage. There is no Santa Claus, I'm sorry. There is no Santa Claus. Don't listen to him. He said, don't listen to him. Even if each of us did our part, it would change nothing as the source of mass pollution at corporate entities. That's kind of my point. I don't mean to be a bad guy on this. I understand that it makes you feel good. Like when you go to Starbucks and they say, hey, would you like to donate $1 to this kid? Yes, I do. I'm a good fucking person. I want to donate $1 to the kid. There is massive amounts of poverty. They're massive. Like, it's like we've come to the bumper sticker society of sorts. This idea that spectacle has taken over the whole thing of the reality of the situation that we find ourselves. The Paris Climate Accord that Obama was going to enter in was not going to do squat. Understand what I'm saying? There's an asteroid that about to hit the planet. And you guys are chiding me about putting things in cans or putting these things in different bins. Your society needs a massive fucking renovation in regards to how it does its energy production, in regards to how it organizes itself. I'm sorry to be a bad guy. Yes, I'm being a bad guy. Throw your cans in a recycling bin. That's good. Your society needs to change. That's what I'm getting at. If scientists are telling you that your society is having some level of collapse based upon your behavior in that society, and we're having this conversation about what can to throw in what bin, then we've missed the boat. We've missed the boat in regards to conversation. We've missed the boat. So I'm sorry. I'll be a bad guy. I'll be a bad guy. Miss Thomas is now being belligerent. Fuck Santa. My shit is still going in a recycling bin. I'm not saying not to put your stuff in the recycling bin. Look, recycling is good. It's not a bad thing at all. You should recycle. All things being equal, you should recycle. So I don't want there to be anyone, you know, pointing a sign saying this guy doesn't want people to recycle. That's not it. I'm making the point in regards to scale, in regards to this thing of your feelings versus the reality of the situation. Thinking that you putting your can in a recycling bin is changing something, giving you this feeling of, oh, I just did something for the environment, I'm Captain Planet. If that feeling in any way allows you to forget the fact that there's an asteroid that's about to hit the planet, then no, it's not helpful. It's only helpful if you do it while at the same time understanding that there's an asteroid that's about to hit the planet, and that we need to renovate how we do our energy production, how we organize ourselves in general. That's all. That's a lot of words, but that's all. Tripozo. No one says it's useless. Just doing it alone will not fix the problem. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Someone understands me. Miss Thomas put a lump of coal in his stocking. Oh, that's Gardner. He's been an ass. Winkle the Burning Burrow. Yep. Both can be right too. Nuances is lost in America these days. Not on this channel. The people on this channel tend to get nuance pretty well because I tend to dwell in nuance. So I dwell in it sometimes. Sometimes I'm over the top. Better learn them to recycle. I do recycle, by the way, Garno. Most of the time. I just don't like this idea that the responsibility of recycling is thrust upon the individual, even though it's not the individual that's causing the goddamn problem. That's all. I rebel against that thought. Captain Planet, she's a hero, gonna take pollution down to zero. That's Miss Thomas. It's not useless. 2 cents of a trillion is still 2 cents, and another 2 cents the next day. I guess you're talking about incrementalism. Incrementalism. You have a car. Yeah. Allow me to present the case. You have a car. And in that car, is the planet. The entire planet. The entire planet fits into this car. Just wrap your mind around it for the moment. The car is going at 80 miles an hour, and in 1 mile, there's going to be a very large mountain that car is going to hit. Now, it's true that you can take the car down to 60 miles per hour, but understand, in 1 mile, you're still going to hit that wall. The question becomes, does incrementalism stop you from hitting the wall? If incrementalism does not stop you in time from hitting that wall, then incrementalism doesn't matter. It would be no difference than if you did nothing at all. If we're playing a game of chess, god damn it, I use a lot of chess analogies, but if you're playing a game of chess and it's mate in 5, it doesn't matter what your next move is. Like, the move that allows the next person to get mate in 5, for the most part, those moves are forced at that point. Same difference. If your incrementalism is going to allow you to still hit that wall, then incrementalism doesn't matter. It's like doing nothing. So. Fuck incrementalism. Balls to the wall is more my speed. Pazzo, I agree. Now, granted, balls to the wall is going to get you a country that's going to be somewhat chaotic, and people are going to rebel and get pissed and everything else. But I enjoy the spirit. Yes, I agree. Garnome, do you realize you'd be supporting the dry, dirty coal industry, right? He doesn't care, man. Garnome doesn't care. He doesn't care. Trump came out with the whole thing for coal, and Garnome was totally on it. That's what I heard. The fact is, in order to avoid the wall, people must adopt certain mindset. Learning what recycling is and doing it helps put people in a productive civic mindset. Yes, Garnome. Those people can recycle till the cows come home, and we're still going to hit that goddamn wall because those people recycling is not the problem. That's what I'm getting at. The problem is nothing. Yes, putting people in the mindset, but putting people in the mindset to what end? Are those people going to get into that mindset and then maul politicians in order to get them to contort law in order to constrain what takes place in regards to energy production and animal agriculture? If not, if the behavior of those people is constrained to, I am going to recycle like a mofo, that's nice. That's good. The oil industry continues to do what the oil industry does. The animal agriculture industry continues to do what the animal agriculture industry does. And the planet continues to take the hit. That's my point. Winkle the Bernie bro. I got where I work to stop throwing out our plastic trash. Instead, we send it to the valley for recycling. My boss now gets a tax credit for his easy to give us. Nice. Very nice. Very nice. Very nice. We have a mindset for universal health care that we cannot get our corporate oligarchy to yield to our mindset. People yield through, I don't want to say force, but through, what's the word I'm looking for? The leverage. They yield through leverage. It's that stuff is not given. It's not like, if people were going to do what they thought was in the best interest of the 90%, they would have done that already. That's not what takes place. Those things happen when the people get mobilized and forced them to do those things. Usually civil unrest is what takes place in regards to getting power to yield something. That doesn't necessarily have to be this kind of overt rioting and everything else, but it definitely usually boils down to people being extraordinarily pissed, and that being extraordinarily pissed being elevated to the higher ranks. I don't understand why people aren't. I don't understand why people don't necessarily merge up in this way. It's like, why do you accept this? I don't get that part. This is kind of why I said to myself, I don't think they would understand that the choice exists. It's like they don't see the move. There's a certain level of programming of, I got enough to make sure my kid is okay, and this is it. This is the best thing, this is all life is. I'm a cog in a wheel. I'm going to spend the entirety of my days doing something for somebody else, making somebody else rich, being exploited in the process. And this is what it means to be a person. And this is what makes me free. It's fucking amazing. I don't understand why they believe it. That's all. Winkle the Bernie Bro, just sub you tomorrow, like your stuff. Oh, thank you, Winky. Winkle. Winkle the Bernie Bro. I love that name. It's like taking it on as a badge of honor. What's the thing in Game of Thrones where the little one, I can't think of his name, but he meets Jon Snow and he says, "You're the bastard," and Jon Snow kind of, you know, demurs a little bit. And he makes this point to him, like, you know, wear those insults like a badge of honor. Wear like armor so it can never hurt you. Game of Thrones is just fucking awesome in general, but I love this idea of just taking on the mantle of the thing that they use to try to smear you. It almost like shames them to some degree. It's like, yes, I will take this armor on, this Bernie Bro. What? What? I will be this Bernie Bro that you yourself have condemned me to be. I love it. Fucking love it. I don't think we disagree here. I think someone looking at the bigger picture and wonder if personal recycling might obscure the corporate element through self-gratification. God, I love the way Triapozo puts it. You are perfectly right. Yes. I thought that's what I said, but fair enough. You're saying it better than I am. Fair enough. We must be aware of industrial pollution, of course, but think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. Yes, nobody's saying that. Nobody's saying that you can't. Nobody's saying that you can't. There's no disagreement here. There's no disagreement. Yeah, there's zero disagreement. Yeah, we've really strayed from this story. I mean, this started off talking about a society that didn't have sound. We're talking about the environment. Let me ask you this. Here's a question. Yeah. Let's be dangerous. Here's a question. If there's a mugger at the door, if there's someone who's beating down your door and you know that they're going to hurt your kid, your person, or your wife, or some other family member, let's say you have friends over it. In defense of those friends, your mugger, and you know, your mother, wife, cousin, all those people. In defense of those people, is it morally just to put that burglar down? Is it morally just? Meaning, it's legally right. From a legal standpoint, you have this idea of protecting yourself. Is it morally just to put him down? Now, if it's morally just to put him down, you're making the argument that, yes, it is morally just for me to put down somebody who is going to injure somebody else. Providing that I knew that the person was going to injure somebody else. This is not like, the guy's unarmed and the person comes in and none of that. In the sandbox reality, we're making the case that it is a flat fact that we know that this person was going to come into the house and injure someone, relative, cousin, niece, whatever. We've essentially created the situation saying, okay, if we're going to defend the life of somebody else, it's okay to take somebody else's life if somebody was being an aggressor or was going to injure or kill somebody else. It's this deprivation of liberty of sorts. This person was going to deprive me of life. So yes, I'm going to put his ass down if it's going to, attack somebody that I care about. Can we expand that to a larger argument? You have a political apparatus that is completely devoid of any ability whatsoever to make laws and rules to govern, to deal with threats as those threats show themselves. The thing that we use in our society to make determinations on, not even just determinations, the things that we use in our society, meaning our ideas, the high priests of our society are scientists. If we're talking about any issue of physical matter reality, we're talking about scientists. Now, this is not getting into this kind of religious argument of God above or hell below. This is literally talking about our planet, our universe. This is their domain. Now, we can make arguments on whether or not we agree with them for, on a particular thing, whether they may put weight and everything else, and you can challenge the results of a particular study. But ultimately, when we're talking about explaining and understanding the way our world works, we're talking about scientists, physicists, chemists, the people who make our drugs, the people who build our planes, the people who make our cars. These people are scientists, engineers. Those scientists are telling us that we're losing massive amounts of biodiversity. They're telling us that the things that we're pumping into our air, the things that we're using for food production, is essentially increasing the rate of climate change, of environmental degradation and as a whole in general, meaning animal agriculture, but also the amount of carbon that we're putting into the atmosphere. These guys are also telling us, in addition to this thing of heating the planet up and creating more intense hurricanes and flooding and damage and all this other stuff, the amount of carbon in our atmosphere is driving down the nutritional density of our foods. Our foods are getting less nutritionally dense based upon the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. It's like candy to plants. Having chubby plants based on our behavior. The amount of plastic that we're putting in our oceans. Sperm count in the West, sperm count of men is going down by 40%. You can name one thing after the next. You're talking about income inequality. You're talking about health in general of people, particularly in one state after the next, or one nation after the next. Particularly in the United States, you can see the rate is down, particularly compared to Western nations. Your public health is declining. You have a situation where you have a global catastrophe that's just waiting to happen, that's literally looming in the wings, that these scientists that we depend on to explain our physical matter reality is telling us this is waiting in the wings. This is going to take place. This is going to absolutely happen. Nothing takes place. There's no change in politics. There's no change in policy. There's no change in anything. There's no political will to get anything done. If we actually believe that scientists, what they're telling us, and we're talking about a global catastrophe, why doesn't the same rule apply in the sense of this kind of morally right argument, this kind of emancipatory violence in order for saving a life or saving multiple lives? Why does the mugger situation work, but not the larger context of there's a global catastrophe that's going to happen and nothing is taking place for our political apparatus? And is it time to change the political apparatus? Don't understand why the question doesn't come up. That's all. If it's okay to put down a mugger in that sense, is it morally right to do nothing in this case? So let's see. Fighting corporate rape of our ecosystem is the defense, which is the point you're making. I'm making the point that if we live on a habitable environment, we have a habitable zone that we as human beings can exist in. And if the state, which is supposed to be our apparatus, meaning the apparatus of the American public, is completely incapable of doing anything about it because they themselves are being bought and purchased by elements of cash, because they need cash to get elected. It's a strange way of putting this, and I guess I don't want to put it as a flat way, because putting it in a flat way sounds immensely inflammatory. But screw it. If violence is okay to put down a mugger because that particular mugger was going to kill the family member or anything else, wouldn't the same level of violence be justified in defending a planet from a planetary catastrophe? If the political apparatus itself is not doing the task of protecting citizenry from what is going to be a disaster, as what we use as our judge of physical matter reality, scientists are telling us, wouldn't violence in that case also be justified in protection of the rest of the planet, or at the very least your particular country? That's more of a philosophical argument. Some people would say, well, violence is never justified in a case like this, and then it becomes, okay, so what global catastrophe is? What's the position on this? And no, I'm not telling anybody to go out and bomb a house or something like that. I'm just asking. John Crab 67. Jamal, I want to thank you. How much I appreciate your channel. Your only equal is Debbie, the same progressive. Oh, I appreciate that. Well, the mob actions are justifiable, irrelevant. They're useless. The forcing multiplied government assists for divestment. Yeah, no, Gardner, I agree. I agree. I'm asking this from a more philosophical point of view. If one is correct, why is the other not? Yeah. Try pause. The problem is that violence is the language of the oppressor. If we speak the language, we lose the moral high ground. See, this is a lefty thing. The point of is not to have the moral high ground. The point is to win. Morality doesn't exist. That's something that you're constraining yourself by. And yes, I agree with you. I feel it, so I get it. But ultimately, that's not necessarily the thing that people win by. You can be as moral as you want to be and lose miserably. The goal is to win. If you need to take unsavory action to win, this is politics. There is no second place. The goal is to win. Speaking of Debbie, I've made the point before. Debbie's values are better than mine. If it's a situation of needing to get something done, my point is to get something done. Yeah, her values are better than mine. You would need a Navy and an Air Force to overcome that, Kevin. Garnome, that's not really true. I understand what you're saying, but that's not fully true. So, say you had 1 million people who said, I'm done. That 1 million people decide to riot and kick up a dust and everything else. Now, the country itself is not necessarily going to activate the military to shoot down its own people. Now, it may, but it is going to look immensely bad. It is going to be a hard time for a country to make that choice. Ultimately, they're probably going to try to have cops and, you know, that type of stuff to do it. What you're talking about, though, is a civil war. Now, just because you have 1 million or so people who are angry and upset and who are bitching and going to rallies and pushing and everything else, doesn't necessarily mean that your country is going to retaliate with this idea of maximum force of shooting the civilian or the population. They're not going to want to do it. They're not going to want to do that. That looks immensely bad. That looks extraordinarily bad. And you create these eddies in your society where the question becomes, is the military actually going to fire on its own people? It's one thing when you get the military to go out and kill people abroad. It's another thing when you have them shooting their neighbors. That's not something the country is going to want to do. That's all I'm saying. Yes, you have cops as robots. You get brutes and, you know, these whoever else that gets into the police force. They would do it to a point. But at which point are you pushing your luck where the people just say no? Look, I don't think it's a good idea to do this kind of violent revolution of sorts. I don't think that works. Particularly for the same reason that you're talking about this idea of helicopters and the Air Force and everything else. You have a country with nuclear missiles. Are you going to win that contest? So that's that point. But you would need to do it below the level of aggression, if that makes sense. Like, you need to be strident and loud and overt, but not to the point of being an aggressor. Being an aggressor loses it for you. Yes, you want the moral high ground. The moral high ground does make you look good to a certain degree, but not at the expense of losing, if that makes sense. Morality only works in certain contexts. The civil rights movement, it worked because it looks immensely bad for them beating the shit out of African Americans in the country who were just wearing suits saying we want a certain amount of freedom. Now, I would say if you're doing a human rights movement, it would be something similar. People wearing suits and standing there saying we want human rights, and making the argument as to how people see themselves in this particular culture right now is the wrong way, and that it could be in a better context. If you had 1 million people doing that, 2 million people, 3 million people, 4 million, that's a change. I mean, not to see change. They don't have to be aggressors. I agree with you. I don't want people to be aggressive in that way. Revolutions are messy, and there's no way to know what the day after looks like when you have one. But a lot of people standing up saying no, oh man, that's a revolution by itself. That's a revolution by itself. The NDA, National Defense Authorization, I gave them lead and protection to do so. I'm guessing they would do it, but the response from the people would turn many of them to hesitate the next time. Yeah, but you got to understand, they're not... It's like riding a horse. Have you ever been on a horse? Like you're... I know this is a weird analogy, but you get on a horse and you're infinitely aware that this is not a car. That this is another creature, and this creature has his own thoughts, and sometimes those thoughts can diverge from your own thoughts. Yes, the president can order whatever the president wants. What the president understands to some degree, and what people sometimes forget, is that ultimately they have choice. It may be difficult for you to say it because it may beat into you to kill whatever is in front of you, but they are still beings of choice. At any point, a lot of people could say no. They can say no. The moment the president loses the capacity to control the military because a large faction of the military said no, you have a civil war. Now, whether or not the president is going to want to do that or not, I don't know. It's like, I just don't think it's an easy choice to put American troops on the ground to shoot down other Americans. That's all. I think it's a harder choice than that because it's somewhat unpredictable in how that could turn out. I just think it's unpredictable. That's all. If it was me, I don't know if I would have the balls to do it. So, with some batshit crazy person in office, maybe. Maybe. Winky the Bernie Bro, as a pacifist, I just don't agree in principle. I see what you mean, I just don't agree with it. Plus, I think you underestimate the lengths of the leap with the goal to keep control. No, Bernie Bro, I'm not... Just understand me. I'm posing this as a hypothetical. I'm not posing this as a my solution to things or my one of things. I don't think it's a good idea because I don't think it works. Like, I don't think a violent revolution works against a stronger enemy in this way. Shaming people in power, and it's not even shaming, making them aware that there are consequences for the behavior. That's all I mean. When you had the Tea Party who was angry and pissed off and going to one political rally after the next, what's his name? Republicans were like, Boehner, he looked at this and was like, holy shit, these people are angry, we're gonna win. He understood that a certain amount of anger and a certain amount of pissed off had a certain level of energy associated with it, and that stuff gets dumped into the public limelight. Well, that gives a certain amount of credibility or a certain amount of cachet of sorts, where the public looks at this and kind of aggregates around a certain point of view. I don't think you need to be aggressive or vicious. I think you need to be, yes, you need to be aggressive. No, you don't need to be violent. In fact, violence works against you. You need to take the moral high ground. Now, if we're talking about politics, yeah, it does help to some degree to take the moral high ground. I guess what I'm saying is, put it this way, because it sounds like I'm saying two different things, two things, and it sounds like I'm contradicting myself, and I'm not. There's a slight nuance here. In the Game of Thrones, it doesn't matter if you're moral. The goal is to win. Ned starts getting his head chopped off. Ned might have been a really good guy, but Ned got his head chopped off in the first scene of Game of Thrones, or first episode, season of Game of Thrones. Had nothing to do with Ned being moral. He had the moral high ground. Didn't matter. It matters what you can optically show, what you can get across to the public, what you can make the public believe, or if you can just take power in a way that the public can't do anything about or nobody else can do anything about. Doesn't matter if you have the moral high ground. That's all I'm getting at. Morality is not the end-all be-all. That's all I'm saying. On the second point, in some cases it does help from a political standpoint. If you're not in this kind of Game of Thrones scenario where you're taking each other's heads, and this is purely this peaceful but aggressive revolution, then yes, having a moral high ground looks immensely good. If you can make this argument that what you're saying is just morally just, Mind you, there's a certain level of self-interest that you're going to have to also get across. But it does help. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt. Kevin, do you know how to make nitrate glycerin from scratch? I do not. Kevin, chemistry is a fun thing. You're talking about building bombs, okay? and look, he's joking, by the way. He's not. This is not. Fucking shut down my channel because the guy talking about nitrate. Let's see. See a winkle. That's funny. All right. This was supposed to be like 10 minutes, but that's fine. We're talking. People showed up, so I'll go with it. D. Martin. When there was a draft, Bernie was a pacifist. He should have been. Look, it's one thing if there are barbarians at your gates and you're like, we need to defend the women and children, we need to go out here and kick some ass. Fair enough. I can perfectly see the justification for violence in defense of somebody else. Fair enough. Why the hell are we in Vietnam? What do we have to do with Vietnam? We had nothing to do with Vietnam. Had no interest at all. It would take the broadest look, I mean, the immensely broad to the degree of being just insane, to go with this idea of, and I understand why they were doing it. They were doing this domino idea, this idea that, you know, you have to stop the Soviet Union in one state after the next, otherwise there will be a domino and all these places will become communist countries. You put in troops into Vietnam. These troops being into Vietnam were in somewhat of a meat grinder. Not to mention, let alone the number of Americans that were killed. Millions of Vietnamese were killed, let alone the atrocities that took place in some of the surrounding areas. And guess what happened? We left. And they fell apart. And Nixon was impeached. I guess my point is, it's not that Bernie Sanders or some of these guys are gurus or mystics or shamans or, you know, psychics, where it's like, wow, that guy was able to predict all of these things right off, you know, from one year to the next. It's the principle that they're functioning under. That's all. We don't need to go into other countries and kick over other countries. It's none of our business. They're not attacking us. We have nothing to do with it. It's none of our business. That's a philosophical position, yes, but that position tends to usually be the right position. Same thing with Iraq. Same thing with whatever, how many other countries that we're in. We have no right to kick over other countries. We have no right to invade other countries. I fundamentally miss what America uses as justification to go into one country after the next. I don't understand what justification is there. How? How does it get the justification to invade another country's borders? If the same thing had happened to us, we would lose our shit. We would go ballistic. But we would invade another country in a heartbeat, and the American public looks at this and doesn't think squat about it. It's like, yeah, we in this country, that country, we have special forces in 70% of the countries around the globe killing people. Who won the Super Bowl? Who won the football game? Who's playing tonight? Who's playing tomorrow night? Want to play some Xbox? Want to get some dominoes? Want to play some cards? Want to play some chess? Did you recycle the other day? This is just fucking insane, man. That's all. I don't understand how we think it's so trivial to kill other people. I don't understand where that comes from. That fundamentally blows my mind. This idea that A, we can put people in prison. B, we can put people in black sites. C, we can murder people even when they're civilians and we have no idea who those people are. And we as Americans look to just mentally casual about it. Sometimes you gotta kill people. It's amazing. D. Martin, he's no longer a pacifist. Funny how that works. He is, I mean, look, when you're president of the United States, let's be fair for a moment. When you're president of the United States, there are certain things that are required of you. Now, I'm not saying going into other countries. Bernie Sanders, God damn it, I'm not defending Bernie Sanders on this. I've heard Bernie Sanders make the argument for Israel and Palestine, saying, look, we need to find a way to deal with that issue, even if it means taking away Israel's cash, meaning the amount of money that the United States pays, to use that as leverage to get Israel to sign a peace treaty with Palestine and then fix the Palestine up. That's a radical position. At least if we're talking about American politics, that's a fucking amazing position. I actually agree with that position. The other position of not invading and kicking over other countries, I agree with that position. Now the question becomes, is Bernie Sanders going to end the drone program and is going to be doing drone strikes? I don't know. Will Bernie Sanders lose a shitload of support the moment Bernie Sanders does his first drone strike? It depends on whether you believe that the people who supporting Sanders are based on a certain amount of integrity, or if they're based on this idea of Sanders as somewhat of a cult figure. That's what it boils down to. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer. Jamal, that was more for Gardner. Now I was listening to it. I know, I was looking at the conversation. I gotta be honest, I agree with Gardner on this one. So I don't think violent revolutions work in this way. Even if you had all of those bomb makers, the United States, here's the problem. Here's the exact problem. This is why it fails. I actually agree with Gardner on this. The very first time you set off a first series of bombs, you're gonna freak the public out. When you freak the public out, the public is going to scream for order, which is going to allow the government to essentially use somewhat hostile tactics in order to put you down. They're going to take away one liberty after the next, whether it's, you know, people being able to get together. They're going to have people whispering, looking out for people who are doing those particular bomb makings. And they're going to be allowed to use military on foreign soil because the public is going to be freaked. Like, it's one thing if the public is behind you and you have this kind of concerted will of the populace, but I suspect what's going to take place is people are going to get scared, and when they're going to get scared, they're going to cede a huge amount of power to the governmental apparatus in order to put you down. They're going to stump one group after the next and a lot of other innocent people in the process. You lose your high ground. The moment that you lose your high ground, you allow the government to attack you in certain ways. That's what I think is wrong. Right, the public is on your side, but okay. So in this, we're postulating that the public is essentially in agreement. Okay, but you're not going to have 100% of the public in agreement. Let's say you get 50%. Let's say you get a massive fucking group of the public saying they're for you. 50%. I'm skeptical, man. I put it this way: the larger the group of the public, the more access to military hardware. So I guess I feel like if you're cast as an army, then it allows the government to use its own military. Yeah, I don't know, man. I slightly disagree on this one, but I feel you. I see where you're coming from. I see where you're coming from. I see where you're coming from. He's not trolling. What do you mean? He's just having a conversation. Yeah, he's not trolling. He's just talking. Just posing a hypothetical. Yeah. I like it. I like it. I like it a lot. He's a Kevin is all talk. What? I don't see anything wrong with the thought. Imagine millions and millions of bomb makers. Here's the thing. I think there's a simpler approach. I honestly think there's a simple approach. Instead of millions and millions and millions of bomb makers, let's say you have 3 million people. Just give me 3 million people. And those 3 million people didn't go to work. A general strike. They just didn't go to work. They stood outside wearing signs saying we're striking for this reason. We're being exploited. general strike. Millions of people saying we're not going to buy certain products. We're not going to shop at certain organizations. We're not going to support certain politicians. We're not going to... I guess I'm making this point. You don't necessarily need violent resistance. Our interactions in our society, we're in a web of capitalism of sorts. We're in this kind of enmeshed in this thing. Your purchasing decisions matter a lot. Where you shop, where you go, where you eat, where you live, all those things matter. Those things are just part of the system itself. You can apply pressure just based upon your habits. Also understand that our habits drives a lot of this behavior. We're not free of blame on this. Now, some of this we can't necessarily help. We have to, get to work, so we drive our cars to work. We're burning gas. We're, assisting our own destruction. We're not necessarily vegetarian, so we're eating animal ag, and that animal ag, for the most part, again, is assisting in our own destruction. It is hard, however, to buck the trend. It's almost like you're in a stream. Your society is in a stream, and you're caught along in that society. And if you're trying to go against the grain, it's more difficult to go against the grain. So I hate what they do to animals. I don't necessarily want to eat animals unless they're humanely raised. Okay, so that means I need to either go to Whole Foods or Elwood Thompson, and neither one of these stores are near me. I am having to making an extra trip in order to expend extra energy to do whatever the fuck is the right actually thing to do. It's like the right choice is the harder choice. It's the harder path. I want to stop eating meat, but god damn it, there's a McDonald's, a Burger King, a Hardee's. All of these things are right here. When I go into the service station, there's somebody who's offering me a sandwich, and that sandwich smells amazing. It is hard to do the right thing. It's like, shit, man, you've constructed a society where doing the right actual thing in this society is the more difficult path to do. We're complicit. That's all I'm saying. I am not optimistic on this front. I've resolved myself into just assuming we will hit a crash or hit the wall. What I've resolved, however, is at some point, whatever cobbles itself back together will be a better society. And at some point, humanity will work its shit out. At some point. I would prefer sooner rather than later, but at some point, we're just not there yet. The technology is there. The will is not. Understand, that is a very important point to understand. We have the capability of having a society where poverty is a thing of the past. Where this thing of this technological society where energy production, where how you function in the fabric of the society itself is just fundamentally different. What is it like to be on a Sunday? What is it like to exist when you don't necessarily have any bills over your head or anything plugging at you? The things that you're doing in that particular day is the things that you want to do. Mind you, you may have some kind of labor that you need to do because for whatever reason you're working. Work always exists. But there is nothing on you. There's no bills over your head. There's nothing in rapture, wrapping you in or anything else. For the most part, you're free. You have a place. Cash. I would argue cash doesn't exist, but even if it did, it's just this idea that the pressures that you have that are typically applied to you are no longer there. You're free. If you want to go to school, you can go to school. If you want to work in a particular industry, well, yeah, you may need to show a certain amount of acumen, but it's a choice. It's a fundamentally different society. But there's no particular reason why we couldn't necessarily have that society versus the society we have. The configurations that we have. And the reason why I started this with this thing of sound or music being outlawed, to try to show how this stuff is somewhat arbitrary. Certain configurations end up being a particular way because people can advantage themselves and they kind of contort the system itself to bend in their will. But it's arbitrary. It doesn't have to be that way. If you had 10 million people saying no, what do you get? If you had 10 million people flooding Washington, what does that look like? What does that look like? Your world changes when you're ready for your world to change. That's what I'm getting at. The government is scared of a united public that thinks for themselves. That's true. Came in late. What Star Trek episode is going to hear on tonight? I'm not on a Star Trek episode, Bob. I'm not talking about the Star Trek thing. I would love to talk about. You know what? What's funny? This is a detour. I was actually thinking about doing Star Trek Channel. One episode after the next. I love that show, man. I see people doing Star Trek on their channel sometimes. I feel sometimes they don't fully do it justice. But I know that's not necessarily that they're not doing it justice. It's just I'm looking at it from a more this kind of political angle. Like, what does the Star Trek universe look like in regards to politics, in regards to culture, in regards to how people interact with one another? And how does that relate to us, where we are here now versus how they are there? It's interesting. It is a value shift. It has to be a value shift. Like, you don't have 20 different tricorders. You have Starfleet issue tricorder. Well, there's a reason for that. They don't see the point in wasting resources and having 10 different companies wasting time and money doing a product. You build the best product that you can build, and you get that product out to the people who need it. Not to mention, in their case, they have a replication device that would automatically build that particular thing for you. So you don't have this thing of scarcity or anything else. What's the best schematic that we have? You build to the best schematic that we have. Flat fact, period. It's not a company building a shitty product because it's going to replace it in a year, because otherwise it's going to go out of business. It doesn't work that way. What's the best product we can build, and you build the best product that you can build. Our society isn't built that way. This is what I mean when I say that some of this stuff doesn't make sense. You have a planet that's finite resources, and you have companies who are forced by the model to which they exist in to essentially build inferior products. If they build a product that would last for 10, 20 years, they would go out of business. So they don't do that. Ultimately, they build a product that would last for a year or so. It would go obsolete, in which case you need to go back and buy another one of those products. That's insane. Those resources get tossed and thrown away, or recycled. As much work as it took to mine all of those products for the most part just get put in a device and tossed. The value of it is not necessarily there. It's more important to have the public continuously buy and consume, as opposed to having the public actually have something that works the way it's supposed to work. So, Garnome, good discussion as usual. Oh, thanks, man. And yeah, I'm gonna call it a day. It's been an hour and a half, and I'm Tuvix. Tuvix was funny. Alright, guys, it's an hour and a half. I was only going to be on here for like 10 minutes, so I appreciate everybody for showing up. Yeah, appreciate everybody showing up. So if you enjoy the content, feel free to share, write, subscribe, and of course you can always support through PayPal or Patreon. Thanks, guys.